I'd like to invite Gail and Tim Bartell to come forward and to sit. Now, so far we have interviewed folks in our congregation who have told their stories, and these people that we've interviewed so far were people that were actually part of this church before I arrived. And we celebrate that, the history of this church and people's lives coming together. These two, this couple has joined, and since I've been here, they came in the summer of 2014 after I arrived, and I'll tell a story about that a little bit later. But I wasn't sure that they were going to come back after their first Sunday, and so why don't we just start like we have with others? And how did you find your way to Longwood Hills Congregational Church?
Well,
I'm sorry. You know what I got to do? Yes. My sound person trusted me, and they shouldn't have.
Tim and I and our family had been at a Lutheran church for many, many, many years. The church we were married in, the church where our children were baptized, and Sunday school, and Tim was on council, and I was leading
what you do here.
What I do here. And it went through some hard times, and the church didn't dissolve completely, but it split in a big way, and it was very, very, very hard for us. We always say it's probably what it feels like to go through a bad divorce, because so anyway, we church shopped a little bit after that, but we didn't find any church home for several years. 5 years, yeah. You can pick up the rest of the story.
Where'd you leave off? So 5 years, kids are getting older, and then, we'd always talked about going to church again, and Gail just had a rule. It's like whatever church we go to, they have to accept all of our kids, because we have a son that's gay, we have a son that's transgender, and we have some poor son who really should have been born into a baseball family. We're a theater family, but we wanted a church that everyone would fit in, and so I did a little research, and I told Gail, hey, tomorrow we're going to go to this church in Longwood called Longwood Hills, and that's when we came here. So,
and I remember that day when you came. You sat right over here in this side here where you usually sit, a little further back on that day. And after church, I greeted you, and then I saw you go out the door and walk over to the fellowship hall, because we actually invited people for fellowship, those of you that go out this door and go right to your car.
See, we've been going to a Lutheran church, so we're like, after church, we're here, where's our prize? Where's the coffee? So that's what
Donuts.
And donuts, right.
Donuts.
Yeah. Where's the refreshments, There's got to be, some payback. Well, they went over there, and I go, oh my gosh, nobody else goes over there. So I ran over there and met with them and talked to them. I go, well, what was church shopping? Oh, well, what are you looking for? And Tim said to me, we're looking for a church that our kids would like. And I go, we ain't going to see you again. I said that to myself. Because we had no teenagers. We had very few, as we still kind of do at this point. So I really did not think they would come back. And indeed, they didn't come back the next Sunday. So I kind of said, well, that's it. But then they started coming back, and they kept coming back, which just mystified me. And until I heard their story. And what he was saying was where our children would be comfortable, where our children would be accepted, and how important that is for people. But tell us a little bit. Now, you talked about being Lutheran. What is in your background? What is your church background?
My mother was raised Salvation Army, and my dad was raised Irish Catholic. And they met and married, neither one practicing as adults, but they could not conceive children for 6 years when they got married and put in for adoption. And the day they got called for a baby, they found out my mother was pregnant with my brother. So they never ended up adopting. They ended up being able to have the three of us. But they were at a Catholic church, in the town they lived in, and the pastor there said, "Oh, we wouldn't be able to baptize your children, though, because you're from a mixed marriage."
Mixed in the sense of?
Neither one had, like she was Salvation Army and he was Catholic and she hadn't converted, and so they kind of just went, never mind. And so they went down the street to a Lutheran church and just started going there. And I was attending there until I was just a few years into grammar school. My brothers were older than I, and they had gotten into confirmation a little bit, but my parents ended up divorcing, and so we all stopped going to church. So Lutheran is what I know, and it's what I found again as a young adult here in Orlando, but that's kind of my background.
I was raised a heathen. When I was a teenager, it was the 70s, it was the whole Jesus thing. I started going to a Southern Baptist church as a teenager, got baptized there. As it turns out, I don't make a very good Southern Baptist, so it never really worked out. The Bartells really did not fit in with that situation. So I really didn't go to church till I met Gail, and she was going to the Lutheran church, and so I started going. The Baptists are very uptight. I'm not, and so we went to church the first time, and the pastor started talking about having a German soda pop. I about fell over because the church I went to in high school would be like Sunday night youth group. It'd like, my mom had a glass of wine the other night. So
that was confession, right?
That was confession. That's when I started going. And when we had kids, something important to me is I wanted my kids to be raised in a church environment. So that was very important to me.
Good. And a German soda pop was a beer.
Can't believe you said it.
Yeah, I said it. So what are, you're both very, very involved here. Tim, you served on the steering committee for a while, the church council, as it transitioned to the steering committee, and done a lot of work around here with the scenery and stuff. Gail, you're on the steering committee now representing worship and bringing to us a neat aspect of our church of drama and theater and directing our choir as well. So we're very grateful for that. It's got to be very hard when you're that involved to leave a church, and you called that a divorce, an ugly divorce.
It's what I can only imagine is a really ugly divorce. And many of us from that church family, which we were quite a family, felt that way. We still, when we run into each other, they're all at different churches now, but when we run into each other, we still say that, we're still a family, that we were together and did so much. Our kids, at one time in our choir, we had two choirs at that church. Each one had about 30 members, each choir. And then I think in our choir we probably had 6 or 7 of us pregnant all the time. Just all had the babies at the same time, and the nursery was packed on choir night, and so it was a family, and our kids all grew up together.
So the church went through a horrible, I would just say a horrible pastor, and it declined and separated, and he believed in dividing and conquering, figuring out who was on his side, who wasn't. And I was on council, and it was very, very stressful. Like I would dream about it at night, and it was like watching something that we've been around for years fall apart, and to the point where the bishop was bringing in people who would buy the property from us. I mean, it was terrible. So I'm really glad we stepped away from that. And so when we started going here, we quickly realized that this church, and I don't know the particulars, went through something similar as far as the church dividing. And I think one of the reasons we enjoyed coming here, because where you were at the time, all 20 people, was that it felt like everybody was working together to move forward, and I think that was important to us and how we got involved.
Those are good points, because pastors can be dividers or they can be uniters. And they can be very important in that way. And we've heard about that before, of others who were drawn because of the pastor initially, but then got connected with the congregation. That's how important all of this is as we work together to share our story. What are some of the things about that you treasure about our church family?
Hands down, the inclusiveness. That was part of the rift. At the same time, was the church we were going to was also in the process of voting whether to allow gay pastors or not, and it had never been a topic of conversation at church, and then all of a sudden it was, and all of a sudden people were being very vocal about where they stood. And so I didn't want to go through that again. So when he did an internet search and found Longwood Hills, he said, "We're going tomorrow," and I went, "Okay, this better be good." And the minute we walked in, we knew that this was different. There were no buts. It wasn't an all are welcome but. And I've experienced that in other places, and churches can all say they welcome people, but do they really walk the walk? You can talk it, but do you really walk the walk? And that's what we saw here.
I think what I enjoy is of this congregation, there doesn't seem to be an upper echelon, or what's the right word? Uppity. The uppity people. The uppity people that are really close to the pastor, and you can't, Probably because we can't afford to have uppity people yet. So when we get more people, we'll have to establish an uppity section there. But I feel like everyone's, and that just may be because I'm older and wiser, but I just feel like everyone's on an equal plane here, and I enjoy that.
Good. Well, we're grateful that you found your way here as well, and we look forward to continuing our conversation in the fellowship hall, and we thank you very much. And we're out of time. So I will try to make this brief. And I know Jim Wagner's over there going, yeah. That would be a miracle, wouldn't it? I think it's so important. And again, we're not here to speak down about any other church. Every church has its place. Every church has the good news for God, for people. We are here to know that the kind of church that we are, the community needs. There are people that live within this community that need to be able to walk in and say and hear that no matter who they are or what they are, in a sense, they're not being judged by that, by the people in the congregation. They can experience and feel and grow within God's love. And there's a place for them, and to know that God loves them and cares for them. So I don't want to ever underestimate nor diminish the power of when people walk in the door. We make assumptions, like I made the wrong assumption about their children. I assumed that this was a family that was looking for this mega church experience where their kids would have all kinds of variety of programs and things available to them. And certainly there's a place for that, and people seek that out. But I was wrong. They were looking for a place where their children would be accepted just for who they are. And it's important for us to know that when God speaks to Moses on that mountain, remember this. He says, I've seen the affliction of my people because of the Egyptians. I have heard their cries, and I know their suffering. Do you realize if somebody sees our problems, our hurts and pains, if somebody knows, if somebody hears us and they know what we're going through, folks, that's intimacy. That's a friend. That's a person who loves us. Moses knew right away this is a God who loves these people, and God doesn't want any of us to be enslaved or in bondage by others for whatever reason. And we worship and follow a God who frees and who unites and who gives life. But here's the catch. Moses wasn't ready for this, because Moses stood back and said, "Oh God, that is wonderful. You know, I'm 80 years old, and I've been away from Egypt for 40 years, and I'm worried and concerned about those people. I'm glad. What took you so long? You know, but I'm glad you're going to do something about it." And then here it comes. Moses, I'm going to send you. I'm going to send you. And God says that to us. For we who have experienced and felt the compassion and the empathy of our God for us, we cannot withhold that. And we can't sit on our mountaintops and in our religious experiences and think that God's going to do it for us. Because God called Moses. Jesus called disciples. Paul and the church gathered followers. And God calls us. I realize that we all may have different comfort levels about reaching out. But it's important for us to be able to listen. And that's why we're telling stories, so that we can begin to understand what is going on in another person's life. We need to listen so that we can have empathy and we can have compassion. And sometimes these stories stretch us, because I can tell you, I raised 2 children, and it was hard enough. I can't imagine what Gail and Tim went through and the challenges. And so first and foremost, it is important for their children to find a place where they experience and feel and hear God's love. It's also important to know there are parents out there who are searching to be connected with God, searching for a place to feel welcomed, searching for community that can support them, they can belong to, and they can thrive in. That's Longwood Hills Congregational Church, folks. That's us. Let us pray.